I know all of us have.
I'm glad that Legal Eagle is also taking a stance. Like, I mean, Legal Eagle has always been a liberal. He's always been woke. And so is Philip DeFranco.
Videos.
All right, we'll watch it.
What is basically the execution of Alex Pretti. I've seen it from more angles and more times than I care to repeat. I'm not going to give an in-depth frame-by-frame analysis. You don't need a lawyer to tell you what you can see with your own eyes, which is that it was an inexcusable state-sanctioned murder. There is no excuse. There is no justification. And it is the latest in what is probably a long line. This one happens to have been videotaped, thankfully, by many brave bystanders.
How do you see this anger playing out? We're comparing it back to the momentum of the Black Lives Matter protests. The Black Lives Matter protests were far faster, and the mobilization was not exactly controlled. It was more so just like an immediate moment of anger, and it was already at a boiling point as well. And that's the reason why they burned down the police precinct. And I would say that now the protests are like much more restrained in general, which some people will get mad at me for saying this, isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's much more directed. They're way more focused on doing ice watch, for example. Even while they're doing like a vigil, there's still people doing ice watch. So the community is actually a lot more mobilized and a lot more organized in general. I think it's also too cold. That probably plays a role in this too. But I think like during BLM, very different circumstances too, because it's like a federal law enforcement agency that's like easier to identify as like a foreign occupation, a non-state occupation, right? As opposed to the local law enforcement that was behaving like a brutal occupation. So the police response in that situation was much more violent as well. It's during COVID. People were very frustrated. In this circumstance, it's like you can get a lot more people on board. But more importantly, I think there's a lot of people that are like looking out for one another, way more organized with protest marshals, things like that. They're not like breaking random storefronts and stuff like that. Because one of the famous moments, not to say that like storefronts breaking down is necessarily going to dilute or undermine the point of the protest. You know that that's not an argument that I've ever presented. As a matter of fact, I've quite frequently and perhaps very famously talked about how human life is far more important than property rights are. Having said that, as far as like building a larger movement, a larger momentum, this kind of more organized protest is definitely a lot better at reaching a larger group of people. A Boogaloo boy started the precinct fire. It doesn't even matter who started the precinct fire. What matters is when the precinct was lit on fire, the majority of Americans said that was an understandable moment. Don't you Americans have the Second Amendment right so you can fight back the government when it starts this bullshit? Yeah, unfortunately, that's not how this works.
As you can tell, I'm not in my studio. I was on a plane yesterday. Oh, God, it's cold out here. It's 0 degrees, which is still 10 degrees warmer than it is in Minneapolis right now. But in some sense, I do this for a living. I analyze the videos that are out there and think about things from a legal perspective. And, I saw the first video when it came out. It was pretty clear. But, with any video taken from across the street, there's some ambiguity. And when I think the second video came out, in the second video, you can hear that Alex Pretti's last words were, "Are you okay?" Which he said to the woman that was next to him, who had been pushed down by the ICE or CBP officer who was acting unhinged, where Alex Pretti just has his phone out and his left arm is free. I think those were his last words, and I think those were his last acts, was trying to help the woman that was pushed down by the man in the green sweatshirt, who I think eventually was the first agent who shot him.
This is not good optics. Shut the fuck up. Let a person be emotional, dude. What the fuck's wrong with you? Jesus Christ. Some of y'all are crazy, man. Like, what do you want? Like a sociopathic delivery every time? Jesus Christ.
And like I said, I'm
You're not even right, for the record. You're wrong. It's like, I mean, I think it's silly to do an analysis on the optics of this. Like, no, he's being vulnerable. That's not necessarily a bad thing.
Not going to go frame by frame, but to my eyes, you know, the last thing that Alex Pretti did was to help others. And look, my legal analysis doesn't change when the victim is, you know, a bank robber or a saint. Everyone deserves the same rights. And it doesn't justify or justify less the actions of what happened, but it does heighten the loss of what happened and the people whose rights are being taken away and their lives are being taken away. So look, I'm going to try and gather some thoughts, which I'm only going to do because I think a lot of people are, you know, thinking the same thing. Whether you're a lawyer or a layperson, I think we're all absolutely enraged, not only by, you know, the loss of Alex Pretti, but Renee Good and everyone else who has been, you know, pushed aside and has been caught in this web of what is clearly illegal action from our federal government. Like I said, it doesn't change the legal analysis, but it does say something that Alex Pretti and Renee Good before him seem to be the best of us. And there's a reason why they were gunned down. It's because they put themselves out there. And by God, that's commendable. And we need to continue to stand up because they did too. And look, you don't need to be a lawyer to know that their shootings were not justified. But I think we need to take a step back too to recognize that, you know, ICE and CBP shouldn't have been there in the first place. They have no right and no duty to do crowd control, to be on the front lines using weapons against protesters. These people should not be armed. We've sort of grown inured to it, but they are not enforcing criminal law. Even when they are enforcing immigration laws, which they are not right now, it is state-sponsored protest control of people exercising their First Amendment rights. At best, they are enforcing regulatory and civil laws. And there's no reason they should have firearms in the first place.
Yep. As I like to say, paperwork violations. That's what their job is. They are not engaging in criminal law enforcement duties, okay? They don't investigate crimes like that. Like, at most, the things that they investigate in the criminal side of things would be like human trafficking, and even then, I assume most of that is still delegated to the FBI.
I don't even think should have less lethals like pepper balls, and they shouldn't be using tear gas and pepper spray and bear spray on protesters. That's insane. It would be as if we gave every postal worker and every person who delivers the mail, you know, an AR-15. They don't need it to complete.
Dude, he's doing classic anti-police arguments that I engage in, by the way, which is interesting. As I love to say, landscapers are the hardest, like the most dangerous job in America. Postmen have a much more deadlier job than cops do. Landscapers have a much deadlier job than cops do. Imagine if you gave a landscaper an AR-15. Imagine if you turned around and you were like, hey, guess what? You pissed me off today. I was having a bad day. I'm going to shoot you. And then there was a concept called qualified immunity for that too. How is he crying and still handsome? He's just a handsome guy, man. What do you mean?
Complete their duties. And it's insane that they have been armed and are wearing flak jackets and are obviously wearing masks for no other reason than to obscure their identity and prevent accountability. Obviously, the shootings are unjustified, but the entire situation that recently Alex Pretti unfortunately found himself in, and the woman next to him, they should not have been pushed aside by these putative federal officers for exercising their First Amendment rights. They should not have been restrained. They should not have been pepper sprayed while they were restrained. And of course, they should not have been shot and murdered while they were prone and restrained. None of that. The entire situation should not have happened. 3,000 ICE and CBP officers should not have been deployed to Minneapolis in the first place. I will echo what some legal commentators have said. This is basically stochastic terrorism. If you send 3,000 untrained psychopaths with guns into a place where people are angry, where they are not effectuating the law, you don't know who's going to die, but you know that people are going to die. And I think that President Trump and I think that Stephen Miller.
Yep. No, it's not even stochastic terrorism. It's just terrorism. That's exactly what it is. It's state-sponsored terrorism, so it's a little different. A lot of people, especially a lot of liberals, don't recognize terrorism as being like conducted by a state unless it's like a foreign adversary. But yeah, no, this is exactly what it is. I mean, this is a domestic occupation. This is what it looks like. And slowly but surely, we are moving in the direction of violating what remains of the Constitution that's supposed to stop things like this from happening. Constitution is supposed to be the safeguard against these sorts of things, and the Trump administration very clearly has already completely dominated the Supreme Court of the United States, and therefore they can just cast aside all of the constitutional law, all the constitutional safeguards that are supposed to be in place that stops the federal government from behaving like this. That's what it is. That's what's going on.
Have blood on their hands. Because this is what they wanted. It's honestly incredible that the people of Minneapolis and Minnesota have shown as much restraint as they have, and that they have not taken the bait, and they have not responded to violence with violence. And that's incredible. And it deserves commendation. Not the least of which because they're not going to be the last. It's going to come to other cities, predominantly blue and majority Democratic cities, because what ICE and CBP are doing is a terror campaign. It is a pretext that they are effectuating anything related to immigration at this point. And also, I will point out that there are a lot of people doing a lot of good. There are a lot of lawyers working overtime. Right after this happened, lawyers who had already received a temporary restraining order saying that ICE could not employ unconstitutional methods to restrain and punish all of the protesters, filed a emergency motion with the Court of Appeals to lift an administrative stay that was put in place, which is a thing that often happens. And it's insane that they would need a TRO in the first place to restrain these people en masse from conducting unconstitutional raids and unconstitutional methods. But the declarations from people who were on the scene and saw Alex Pretti shot with their own eyes, it's crazy that lawyers would respond within a few hours and get that in front of a judge. It's also...
yeah, this is what Legal wrote to me 2 years ago, but that was just like, he wrote that just to get me to buy it and fundraise for the fundraiser for the IDF, not the bad one, but the good IDF. He wrote on his gavel, which is somewhere behind me, I don't know where it is in this room, to my best friend Hassan, you are a light in the darkness. Your stunning intellect and towering wisdom have made you a guiding star, always leading us towards better days. Your presence is a sanctuary of comfort and joy. Thank you for being the incredible human that you are and shining so brightly in my world. This is something Legal wrote about Hassan in an auction for charity 2 years ago, but it was a joke. I don't think he actually believes all that.
There was some parallel litigation from the Minnesota Bureau in charge of the investigation that was stymied by ICE, which is another thing for another day. Within a few hours, they had a motion in front of a judge seeking a temporary restraining order to prevent ICE from destroying evidence because they already mucked up the crime scene. The declarations and affidavits from people in support of that are also incredible. And another incredible thing that is within 2 hours, a Trump-appointed judge granted the TRO. And these are not perfect mechanisms. It's something that in the past has helped to prevent ICE from destroying evidence, which I think they did in the case of Jonathan Ross, when they took all of the stuff out of his house and put it God knows where. It probably goes without saying, but it's unfortunate and it's crazy that we cannot trust federal officers in the first place. But
we can't trust federal officers. We can't trust federal agencies. Like the entire confidence collapsing within these previously very important institutions, like, because as much as a rugged lefty as I am, I still understand why you're supposed to trust these institutions. And that's one of my major arguments, one of my major criticisms for the way that these guys betray the confidence in the public. It's pretty wild that, like, you got a lot of people who have made their entire lives, like their livelihood relies on the court system working in a consistent manner. Otherwise, how can you be a lawyer? You know, like there has to be some stability. And now you have legal being like, you can't trust the federal government, which is correct, by the way. It is correct. In the absence of these institutions holding everything together, the entire system collapses.
We also cannot trust them to investigate. There are also things that Congress can and should do immediately. Obviously, they should not fund ICE in the future, but that's the table stakes. We need to have serious curtailment of the immunity that exists. Federal officers do not have absolute immunity, but they do have strong immunity, and it is incredibly difficult to sue the federal government when you have had your constitutional rights deprived. Obviously, there's qualified immunity on a state level when state actors do that. It would be unbelievably easy for Congress to amend the current laws to provide a right of action for people to be able to sue, to remove qualified immunity unnecessarily, and to prevent all of this stuff in the future, because the current framework for immunity for people who commit heinous crimes like these, I think it's untenable and it's disgusting. And then, of course, the people who are responsible for this at the very top need to be impeached. This is an impeachable offense. Like I said, I truly believe that this is, or some version of this is exactly what Donald Trump and Stephen Miller wanted. And in some sense, they have gotten what they wanted. And now it's time for them to be removed from office because they are absolutely unfit from top to bottom. It needs to be removed root and stem. And if you thought it couldn't get any more craven than it is, within hours of Alex Pretti's shooting, Pam Bondi sent a letter to Governor Tim Walz saying that if they would turn over voter information, then they would withdraw ICE from Minneapolis. So if you want a confession that this was never about immigration and that on some level this is about winning the next election, and that if you thought that these people couldn't get any more craven, they can, and they will, and they did. I'm flabbergasted from everything that's happened. The thing that...
Oh, shit. Trump just told the Wall Street Journal he doesn't know if he supports the officer who shot Alex Pretti. Talked to Trump about Minneapolis today, where he says, at some point we will leave, and said he didn't know if he supported ICE officer who shot Alex Pretti. Ooh, this is progress, okay? This is progress, and it would not have happened if it wasn't for so much pushback. And it's not ending here. The next time they try to do this shit, they're going to have to fold faster, because now that Minneapolis is a testing ground for administrative overreach, for federal overreach, and a failure, now there will be even more pushback. There will be faster mobilization. This is why I was saying, like, the general strike that was put together in Minneapolis was so important. You were really hoping for a miracle from Trump just because he said that? No. Delusional, we think Trump isn't going to flop right back over. Brother, he was talking about deploying the military like a week ago. Okay? He was talking about deploying the military and invoking the Insurrection Act a week ago. Not really progress. They're just figuring out where the line is. No. Listen, there's an unlimited amount of pain that this administration is willing to dish out. If he's even backpedaling a little bit, that means that it's getting to a point where it's no longer tenable. This is a war of attrition, as is every war, really. And he has atrophied far too much popular support at this point. So much so that he's recognizing it, which is why he's like potentially pulling out. Now, if they go to Maryland next, right? And then Maryland mobilize in a similar fashion. If they go to Philadelphia next and Philadelphia mobilize in a similar fashion with an even stronger showing. If they go to Maine and Maine mobilize in a similar fashion with community organizing, community response, rapid response groups all around, and potentially a more emboldened, more galvanized labor movement on top of that, that sees the success of being able to purge ICE agents from their own boundaries by demonstrating. Wherever he goes next, there will be even more pushback.